Hare Krishna, my friends. Here we are, Friday night, Nectar of Devotion. I'm here in Bhaktiville. And Kandita's here. Yay! So Kandita's here, Bhakti Grease is here, Bhakti Mimulus is here. The regular gang, we're all here. Welcome, welcome, welcome. So we are reading Nectar of Devotion. And we're continuing chapter 15 from last week. And that chapter is called Spontaneous Devotional Service. It's page 123 in the book or page 159 of the PDF. So before we get started, let me offer my respectful obeisances unto His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada, who is very dear to Lord Krishna, having taken shelter at his lotus feet. Our respectful obeisances are unto you, O spiritual master, servant of Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Goswami. You are kindly preaching the message of Lord Chaitanya Dev and delivering the Western countries which are filled with impersonalism and voidism. Jai Prabhupada. I also offer my respectful obeisances unto the Vaishnava devotees of the Lord here in Bhaktiville who are listening to us online and in the world and universe around us. They are just like desire trees and can fulfill the desires of everyone. They are full of compassion for the fallen conditioned souls. All right. Page 123 of the book, 159 of the PDF. Let's get going. So we stopped midway, so I'm going to just backtrack a little bit and read one paragraph and then pick up where we stopped. Bhaktiville just wrote to me. What Bhaktiville wrote to me about? Come join us. Bhaktiville says, come join us. It's very interesting. Jai. All right. So I'm going to read a paragraph on 122, and then I'll skip forward to where we were. So this is the chapter on spontaneous devotional service. There may be some difficulty in understanding that both the gopis and Kamsa achieved the same goal, so this point should be clearly understood because the attitudes of Kamsa and Shishupal were different from that of the gopis. Although in all these cases, the focus is on the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and all of the devotees are elevated to the spiritual world, there is still a distinction between these two classes of souls. In the first canto of Srimad Bhagavatam, it is said that the absolute truth is one, and he is manifested as impersonal Brahman, Paramatma, Supersoul, and Bhagavan, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Here is a spiritual distinction. Although Brahman, Paramatma, and Bhagavan are the same and one absolute truth, still devotees like Kamsa or Shishupal could attain only to the Brahman effulgence. They could not have realization of Paramatma or Bhagavan. That is the distinction. So let's skip this next paragraph and continue on to where we ended last week. Srila Rupa Goswami is trying here to describe the different achievements of the impersonalists and the personalists. Generally, those who are impersonalists and inimical to the Supreme Personality of Godhead get entrance only into the impersonal Brahman, when and if they reach spiritual perfection. The impersonalist philosophers are in one sense like the enemies of the Lord, because the out-and-out enemies of the Lord and the impersonalists are both allowed to enter only into the impersonal effulgence of the Brahmajyoti. So it is to be understood that they are of similar classification. And actually, the impersonalists are enemies of God because they cannot tolerate the unparalleled opulence of the Lord. They try always to place themselves on the same level with the Lord. That is due to their envious attitude. Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu has proclaimed the impersonalists to be offenders of the Lord. The Lord is so kind, however, that even though they are his enemies, they are still allowed to enter into the spiritual kingdom and remain in the impersonal Brahmajyoti, the undifferentiated light of the Absolute. Sometimes an impersonalist may gradually elevate himself to the personal conception of the Lord. The Bhagavad Gita confirms this, quote, "After many births and deaths, he who is actually in knowledge surrenders unto me," end quote. By such surrender, an impersonalist can be elevated to the Vaikuntha Loka, the spiritual planet, where, as a surrendered soul, he attains bodily features like the Lord. In the Brahmanda Purana, it is stated, quote, "Those who have achieved liberation from material contamination, and those who are demons and are killed by the Supreme Personality of Godhead, become absorbed in the Brahman concept of life and reside in the spiritual sky of the Brahma Jyoti," end quote. That spiritual sky is far beyond the material sky, and it is confirmed also in the Bhagavad Gita that beyond this material sky there is another eternal sky. The enemies and the impersonalists may be allowed to enter into this Brahman effulgence, but the devotees of Krishna are promoted all the way to the spiritual planets. Because the pure devotees have developed their spontaneous love for the Supreme Personality of Godhead, they are allowed to enter into the spiritual planets to enjoy spiritual bliss in association with the Supreme Personality of Godhead. In the 10th canto, 87th chapter, 19th verse of Srimad Bhagavatam, the Vedas personified address the Lord in this way, quote, "My dear Lord, yogis meditate upon your localized features, and thus they achieve the spiritual perfection of being merged in the impersonal Brahma Jyoti. Persons who treat you as an enemy achieve the same perfection without meditating. The gopis, who are embraced by your serpentine hands and who have such lusty attitudes, also achieve the same perfection. And, as far as we are concerned, being different demigods in charge of the different parts of Vedic knowledge, we are always following in the footsteps of the gopis. Thus we hope to attain the same perfection," end quote. By the same perfection, we must always remember the example of the sun and the sunshine. Those who are impersonalists can merge into the sunshine, like Brahma Jyoti, whereas those who are in love with the Supreme Person enter into the supreme abode of the Lord, the Loka Vrindavan. The lusty attitude of the gopis does not refer to any sort of sex indulgence. Srila Rupa Goswami explains that this lusty desire refers to the devotee's particular attitude of association with Krishna. Every devotee in his perfectional stage has a spontaneous attraction to the Lord. This attraction is sometimes called the lusty desire of the devotee. The lust in is the devotee's excessive desire to serve the Lord in a particular capacity. Such desire may seem to be a desire for enjoying the Lord, but actually the endeavor is to serve the Lord in that capacity. For example, a devotee may be desiring to associate with the personality of Godhead as his cowherd friend. He will want to serve the Lord by assisting him in controlling the cows in the pasturing ground. This may appear to be a desire to enjoy the company of the Lord, but actually it is spontaneous love, serving him by assisting in managing the transcendental cows. So the Sanskrit word for lust is lobha. So you might hear people talk about lobha, L-O-B-H-A. And it's just here, as Prabhupada explains, it's a greedy desire to satisfy the Lord in the service that you're doing. This extreme desire to serve the Lord is manifest in the transcendental land of Braj, and it is specifically manifested amongst the gopis. The gopis' love for Krishna is so elevated that for our understanding, it is sometimes explained as being lusty desire. The author of Sri Chaitanya Charitamrita, Kaviraj Krishna Das, has explained the distinction between lusty desire and the service attitude in this statement. Quote, lusty desire refers to the desire to gratify one's personal senses, and transcendental desire refers to the desire for serving the senses of the Lord. In the material world, there is no such thing as a lover wanting to please the senses of his beloved. Actually, in the material world, everyone wants mainly to gratify his own personal senses. The gopis, however, wanted nothing at all but to gratify the senses of the Lord, and there is no instance of this in the material world. Therefore, the gopis' ecstatic love for Krishna is sometimes described by scholars as being like the lusty desire of the material world, but actually, this should not be taken as a literal fact. It is simply a way of trying to understand the transcendental situation. Great devotees up to the standard of Uddhava are very dear friends of the Lord, and they desire to follow in the footsteps of the gopis. So the gopis' love for Krishna is certainly not material, lusty desire. Otherwise, how could Uddhava aspire to follow in their footsteps? Another instance is Lord Chaitanya himself. After accepting the sannyas order of life, he was very, very strict about avoiding association with women. But still, he taught that there is no better method of worshiping Krishna than that conceived by the gopis. Thus, the gopis' method of worshiping the Lord, as if impelled by lusty desire, was praised very highly, even by Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. This very fact means that although the attraction of the gopis for Krishna appears to be lusty, it is not in the least bit material. Unless one is fully situated in the transcendental position, it is very difficult to understand the relationship of the gopis with Krishna. But because it appears to be just like ordinary dealings of young boys and girls, it is sometimes misinterpreted to be like the ordinary sex of this material world. Unfortunately, persons who cannot understand the transcendental nature of the love affairs of the gopis and Krishna take it for granted that Krishna's love affairs with the gopis are mundane transactions, and therefore they sometimes indulge in painting licentious pictures in some modernistic style. On the other hand, the lusty desire of Kubja is described by learned scholars as being almost lusty desire. Kubja was a hunchback woman who also wanted Krishna with great ecstatic love. But her desire for Krishna was almost mundane, and so her love cannot be compared with the love of the gopis. Her loving affection for Krishna is called kama praya, or almost like the gopis' love for Krishna. So praya means almost. It's almost like the gopis. Kupcha, remember Krishna stood on her feet and pulled on her hands and straightened her all up. It's such a great story. Okay, chapter 16, Varieties of Love for Krishna. Bhakti says he likes that story too. Yes, it's a great story. All right, chapter 16, Varieties of Love for Krishna. Parental relationship. In the attitude of the denizens of Vrindavan, such as Nanda Maharaj and Mother Yashoda, is to be found the ideal transcendental concept of becoming the father and mother of Krishna, the original personality of Godhead. Actually, no one can become the father or mother of Krishna, but a devotee's possession of such transcendental feelings is called love of Krishna and parental relationship. The Vrishnis, Krishna's relatives at Dwarka, also felt like that. So spontaneous love of Krishna in the parental relationship is found both amongst those citizens of Dwarka, or the denizens of Dwarka, who belong to the dynasty of Vrishni, as well as amongst the inhabitants of Vrindavan. Spontaneous love of Krishna, as exhibited by the Vrishnis and the denizens of Vrindavan, is eternally existing in them. In the stage of devotional service, where regulative principles are followed, there is no necessity of discussing this love, for it must develop of itself at a more advanced stage. Persons desiring to follow in the footsteps of such eternal devotees of the Lord as the Vrishnis and Vrindavan denizens are called Raganuga devotees, which means that they are trying to attain to the perfection of those devotees. These Raganuga devotees do not follow the regulative principles of devotional service very strictly, but by spontaneous nature they become attracted to some of the eternal devotees, such as Nanda or Yashoda, and they try to excuse me, and they try to follow in their footsteps spontaneously. There is a gradual development of the ambition to become like a particular devotee, and this activity is called Raganuga. We must always remember, however, that such eagerness to follow in the footsteps of the denizens of Braj, Vrindavan, is not possible unless one is freed from material contamination. In following the regulative principles of devotional service, there is a stage which is called anarta nivritti, which means the disappearance of all material contamination. Sometimes it is found that someone is imitating such devotional love, but factually he is not freed from anartas or unwanted habits. It has been seen that a so-called devotee proclaims himself a follower of Nanda, Yashoda, or the gopis, while at the same time his abominable attraction for mundane sex life is visible. Such a manifestation of divine love is mere imitation and has no value. When one is actually spontaneously attracted to the loving principles of the gopis, there will be found no trace of any mundane contamination in his character. Therefore, in the beginning, everyone should strictly follow the regulative principles of devotional service, according to the injunctions of the scriptures and the spiritual master. Only after the stage of liberation from material contamination can one actually aspire to follow in the footsteps of the devotees in Vrindavan. It is said by Sri Rupa Goswami, quote, "When one is actually liberated from material contamination, he can also remember an eternal devotee in Vrindavan in order to love Krishna in the same capacity. And developing such an aptitude, one will always live in Vrindavan, even within his mind," end quote. The purport is that, if it is possible, one should go and physically be present at Brajabhumi Vrindavan and be engaged always in the service of the Lord, following the devotees in Brajdam, the spiritual realm of Braj. If it is not possible, however, to be physically present at Vrindavan, one can meditate anywhere upon living in that situation. Wherever he may be, one must always think about life in Brajdam and about following in the footsteps of a particular devotee in the service of the Lord. Okay, Kandita has a comment. She says, I have a question. Was Queen Kunti in the mood of parental love like Mother Yashoda, or was she in servitude? She was one of the devotees in Krishna's pastimes and who knew he was actually the Supreme Personality of Godhead. She also had awe and reverence. I'm not sure, and I'm not sure that Prabhupada mentions her here, but I think that's a good question to research over the next week. I do know that each one of these builds on the one before. So parental affection does have qualities of the of Dasya, the one before it. So and Bhakti says, I have never read about that. Research where? Research, through the database, just looking up Kunti and adding in parental. So we can do a search like that. Yes. And Kandita says one has to extrapolate from her prayers in the prayers of Queen Kunti. Yes. But Srila Prabhupada really does mention most of these people. So let's make that our homework, all of us. Bhakti says, but isn't extrapolation mental speculation? Well, it's one thing to go off on your own. That would be mental speculation. But to base it on things that Srila Prabhupada said, that would not be mental speculation. Yes, if he said it, yes. Yes, so the book, The Prayers of Queen Kunti, maybe he does mention that in that book. So we'll take that on as our homework, okay? We'll come back next week and see if anybody found anything. Yes, her prayers are amazing. Pandita says her prayers are just beautiful, in all caps, beautiful. All right, good, we have homework. Woohoo! I love homework. All right, we're at the bottom of 128. A devotee who is actually advanced in Krishna consciousness, who is constantly engaged in devotional service, should not manifest himself even though he has attained perfection. The idea is that he should always continue to act as a neophyte devotee as long as his material body is there. Activities in devotional service under regulative principles must be followed even by the pure devotee. But when he realizes his actual position in relationship with the Lord, he can, along with the discharging of regulative service, think within himself of the Lord under the guidance of a particular associate of the Lord, and develop his transcendental sentiments in following that associate. In this connection, we should be careful about the so-called Siddha Pranay. It's also called Siddha Pranali. The Siddha Pranay process is followed by a class of men who are not very authorized and who have manufactured their own way of devotional service. They imagine that they have become associates of the Lord simply by thinking of themselves like that. This external behavior is not at all according to the regulative principles. The so-called Siddha Pranay process is followed by the Prakrita Sahajya, a pseudo-sect of so-called Vaishnavas. In the opinion of Rupa Goswami, such activities are simply disturbances to the standard way of devotional service. Sri Rupa Goswami says that learned acharyas recommended that we follow the regulative principles even after the development of spontaneous love for Krishna. According to the regulative principles, there are 9 departmental activities, as described above, and one should specifically engage himself in the type of devotional service for which he has a natural aptitude. For example, one person may have a particular interest in hearing, another may have a particular interest in chanting, and another may have a particular interest in serving in the temple. So these, or any of the other 6 different types of devotional service, remembering, serving, praying, engaging in some particular service, being in a friendly relationship, or offering everything in one's possession, should be executed in full earnestness. In this way, everyone should act according to his particular taste. conjugal love. Devotional service, following in the footsteps of the gopis of Vrindavan or the queens at Dwarka, is called devotional service in conjugal love. This devotional service in conjugal love can be divided into two categories. One is indirect conjugal love, the other is direct. In both of these categories, one has to follow the particular gopi who is engaged in such service in Goloka Vrindavan. To be directly attached to the Supreme Personality of Godhead in conjugal love is technically called Kali. This Kali performance means to directly join with the Supreme Personality of Godhead. There are other devotees who do not wish direct contact with the Supreme Person, but who relish the conjugal love affairs of the Lord with the gopis. Such devotees enjoy simply by hearing of the activities of the Lord with the gopis. This development of conjugal love can only be possible only with those who are already engaged in following the regulative principles of devotional service, specifically in the worship of Radha and Krishna in the temple. Such devotees gradually develop a spontaneous love for the deity, and by hearing of the Lord's exchange of loving affairs with the gopis, they gradually become attracted to these pastimes. After this spontaneous attraction becomes highly developed, the devotee is placed in either of the above-mentioned categories. This development of conjugal love for Krishna is not manifested in women only. The material body has nothing to do with spiritual loving affairs. A woman may develop an attitude for becoming a friend of Krishna, and similarly, a man may develop the feature of becoming a gopi in Vrindavan. How a devotee, in the form of a man, can desire to become a gopi is stated in the Padma Purana as follows. Quote, in days gone by, there were many sages in Dandakaranya. Dandakaranya is the name of the forest where Lord Ramachandra lived after being banished by his father for 14 years. At that time, there were many advanced sages who were captivated by the beauty of Lord Ramachandra and who desired to become women in order to embrace the Lord. Later on, these sages appeared in Goloka Vrindavan when Krishna advented himself there, and they were born as gopis or girlfriends of Krishna. In this way, they attained the perfection of spiritual life. End quote. The story of the sages of Dandakaranya can be explained as follows. When Lord Ramachandra was residing in Dandakaranya, the sages who were engaged in devotional service there became attracted by his beauty and immediately thought of the gopis in Vrindavan, who enjoyed conjugal loving affection with Krishna. In this instant, it is clear that the sages of Dandakaranya desired conjugal love in the manner of the gopis, although they were well aware of the Supreme Lord as both Krishna and Lord Ramachandra. They knew that Lord Ramachandra was an ideal king and could not accept more than one wife. But Lord Krishna, being the full-fledged personality of Godhead, could fulfill the desires of all of them in Vrindavan. These sages also concluded that the form of Lord Krishna is more attractive than that of Lord Ramachandra, and so they prayed to become gopis in their future lives to be associated with Krishna. Lord Ramachandra remained silent, and his silence shows that he accepted the prayers of the sages. Thus they were blessed by Lord Ramachandra to have association with Lord Krishna in their future lives. As a result of this benediction, they all took birth as women in the wombs of gopis at Gokula, and as they had desired in their previous lives, they enjoyed the company of Lord Krishna, who was present at that time in Gokula Vrindavan. The perfection of their human form of life was thus achieved by their generating a transcendental sentiment to share conjugal love with Lord Krishna. I'm going to finish this page. We're at the 30-minute mark, but I'll finish this page. Conjugal love is divided into two classifications, namely conjugal love as husband and wife, and conjugal love as lover and beloved. One who develops conjugal love for Krishna as a wife is promoted to Dwarka, where the devotee becomes the queen of the Lord. Those who develop conjugal love for Krishna as a lover are promoted to Goloka Vrindavan, to associate with the gopis and enjoy loving affairs with Krishna there. We should note carefully, however, that this conjugal love for Krishna, either as gopi or queen, is not limited only to women. Even men can develop such sentiments, as was evidenced by the sages of Dandakaranya. If someone simply desires conjugal love, but does not follow in the footsteps of the gopis, he is promoted to association with the Lord at Dwarka. In the Mahakurma Purana it is stated, quote, great sages, who were the sons of fire gods, rigidly followed the regulative principles in their desire to have conjugal love for Krishna. As such, in their next lives, they were able to associate with the Lord, the origin of all creation, who is known as Vasudeva or Krishna. Every one of them got him as their husband. All right, and there we have it, tonight's reading. Next week we'll keep on. Parenthood or friendship is the next section in this chapter. Thank you so very much for coming. Good to see you all. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. Jai.